Welcome to the Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Hello.
Hey.
Guten Tag.
Aloha.
Hola. Shalom.
Hello.
Namaste.
Ni hao.
Privet.
Hello.
Salut. Yassas.
Salve.
Ciao.
Bonjour. Our podcast talks about the latest trends in the worlds of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crypto and Blockchain Talk. Today with me, I'm telling you right now, we're going to have a whale of a time. I have a guy with me who I've already started to have a hell of a laugh with, and we haven't even started. His name is Ryan Worsley, and he is the CTO of IOV42. And we're going to talk about a lot of stuff with him, but in the first instance, let's welcome Ryan. Ryan, welcome to Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Hi, nice to meet you again, formally, properly, publicly. Hi. Aviva, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Yeah, really good. I mean, it's sunny here for the first time in forever. I'm on the south coast of the UK, and it hasn't been sunny or warm for a very long time, so I'm feeling full of the joys of spring, as we say.
Oh, wait a minute. Is today spring?
I mean, this is England, like,
Yes,
it's really hard to say for sure.
Yeah, do you know what day summer's on today, this year, in 2022? No?
No idea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've not booked it yet, I don't think.
Well, I have to tell you, it's going to be, I think, as volatile as the cryptosphere, because right now, as we all know, Bitcoin is all over the place. So, I don't know if you're a Bitcoin billionaire or what you are, but if...
No, I like everyone else, have much regret for not buying and holding early on, I think.
Yeah,
indeed.
No doubt. You know what I was doing yesterday? I was actually looking. I went onto CoinMarketCap so I could see where we were today in terms of the price of crypto.
Yeah.
I then did the regretful expansion. Do you do this? Do you go on like the all-time?
Yeah, so you can every time.
Oh.
I like to see the graph. I like to see the hockey sticks. I like to see all those points that I missed. The one I really kicked myself for the most was when the pandemic began.
Yeah.
And I saw it crashing, and I thought, this will recover. This will definitely recover. I should buy.
Yeah.
And it didn't. And I don't know why. And then it recovered enormously, and yes, much regret. But there we are. But I actually exited all of my crypto positions. Was it the beginning of last year? I think it was the beginning of last year. I sold everything I had because I decided I couldn't live with the stress of just constantly checking or wondering, or just that kind of nagging thought, like, is it going up? Is the number going up? Is the number going down? So I decided I didn't want that in my life, and exited. Yeah.
Do you know, Ryan?
Does that make me a bad person? Does that make me unpopular with your listenership?
Ryan, I think we're brothers in arms or sisters in arms or God
sisters
knows
in
what.
arms.
I have no idea what we are, but we are. You're
humans
like my
arms.
brother from another mother, because I got to tell you something right now. I feel that I'm with you on that, because I'm very. I mean, I have that same sensibility and sensitivity, because I'm cut from the same cloth, definitely, because it's very stressful. Isn't it?
Yeah.
And I mean, can
definitely.
you imagine? Okay, look, I have a lot of friends.
I admire that.
Yeah, I admire that too. I have a lot of friends actually who are also of the same ilk. They bought Bitcoin a long time ago. They locked it away, and they said, whatever happens, happens. And of course, they're going to be laughing in the long run. They still haven't. I still have friends who haven't touched a thing. Yeah. But then I also have other friends who are just like you and me, who are just like, it's too much of an adrenaline rush. Yeah.
I'm not a gambler. I realized this at a young age, like when being dragged to a casino drunkenly in the UK, probably underage, can't remember. Sounds likely. But I realized I did not enjoy the sense of, just not getting any value for my money. And people would say that there's fun that you get, that's the value you receive. I didn't really have fun. I just had stress. I grew up quite poor on council estates in the UK, and so we didn't have a lot. And so for me, everything I've got in life, I've had to work quite hard for. Sob story. There should be violins right now.
Oh, I'm getting some violins. Don't worry, I'll have an overload.
Where is the orchestra? I was promised an orchestra. But yeah, like just the thought of having this money sitting in this thing that could just crash at any minute. It was really hard to sort of square that circle. And for me in particular, because of what I do for a living, because I'm the CTO of a company that builds distributed ledger technology, I had loads of friends just coming to me all the time saying, hey, I've heard about this crypto thing. Should I put all of my life savings in that? Or even better, the conversation I paraphrased was more, please confirm for me that I should put my life savings in there. They're appealing to authority. They're looking for you to that authority. And that really, for me, made me sit down and ask myself, like, is this actually a wise investment opportunity that exists here? Or is it something else? And I was forced, I sit somewhere in the middle on this because I really do believe in crypto technologies as being things that will transform the world. I think that is got some inevitability about it. But at the same time, it wasn't clear to me how Bitcoin or Ethereum or really any coin that existed was providing real value. I have this thing about this speech I give to my friends whenever they ask about investing in crypto, which is right now there's no value or utility in a lot of cryptocurrencies, or at least I've not seen many that provide that. There are some notable exceptions whose names I won't remember, but they're really just predicated on supply and demand. The number goes up because lots of people want to buy it because they think they're going to make some money. Like, it's a pure speculative instrument, and that, as long as you go into it with that mindset and understanding that's what you're doing, then fine. And what I just found with a lot of my friends is they're lovely people, but they're not sophisticated in the sense that they would be able to make that decision soundly, I would say. So my recommendation to a lot of them was just like, no, I don't think this is right for you. I think stick your funds in an index tracker. You're more likely, you're not going to make massive returns, but you're going to make a safe return over a long period of time. And I think that makes me unpopular in crypto circles now, because obviously that's not a popular opinion. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what I think. That's what this podcast is all about. All I do all day long is tell people, just like I'll do in this disclaimer, actually, I'll do right now. I won't wait till the end of the podcast. Remember to do your research. Remember to do your due diligence. Remember to only risk what you can afford to lose, because too many people are like sheep, and they're basically following some famous person who will go out there and say, oh, I'm now supporting Shiba Inu. You should buy some Shiba Inu. It's a really great. And do you know what's really sad about it? Like for instance, Robinhood now have put that into their new portfolio because they've just distributed like 2 million wallets to their users. Yeah. And they've put that in their portfolio, a real shit coin. And so the problem is that people don't understand a lot of stuff here. What they also don't understand, it's not just that educational part, it's the emotional part. And there is a lot of emotion when it comes to something as volatile as Bitcoin, because look, even Elon Musk, he bought definitely at, he bought what, 1.5 billion? Well, when I say he, it's actually Tesla, they used it for the corporate treasury, but $1.5 billion worth of freaking Bitcoin, that's a lot of money,
That makes the number go up,
of course it made everybody jump, just like it did with stupid Doge. I mean, talk about another shit coin, which is now, of course, they're talking about implementing Doge. And if you want to buy Twitter products or advertising or whatever, they're trying to give utility to a shit coin when there's so many other coins they could have used. But at the very end of the day, it comes down to, like you just so eloquently stated, it comes down to understanding not only about this whole space, but also doing the homework and the research and having also an understanding about your emotions, because it's it's not just volatile, it's crazily volatile. It's like the worst ride on the worst roller coaster you can imagine, with more flips and turns. And just when you think you're okay, you got to go and buy a pair of underpants because the skid marks won't come out of your last pair. So, it's like I was trying to say, I guess, in the beginning, it's okay for Elon Musk. And you're like, it's okay.
This is play money for him, right?
It's nothing. The guy's worth over $100 billion personally. Mm-hmm. Of course, like I said, this was corporate treasury money. But I think he also, I don't even know what's true anymore in the media. I mean, I don't even know what's true half the time what's coming out of my own mouth, because I'm just parroting some of the stuff that's coming out of the media. There's a whole
rabbit hole we can go down there.
Oh,
that's really interesting.
Oh my God, I'd love to do that with you. I would love to do that with you. But
write that on a notepad or something.
I
wanted to say, like, as much as I've kind of exited my positions and whatnot, and I couldn't see the utility or value with a lot of cryptocurrencies. I don't sit fully on the other side of the fence either, which is, there's a lot of people now who are getting quite a lot of attention on Twitter and places like that just by really dumping on the whole crypto space entirely and saying, it's a scam, it's a Ponzi scheme, it'll never provide utility, it'll never provide value. And I think they're just too extreme in the other direction, because I don't think that that's the reality, right?
No.
I think these technologies can provide real utility and value, and some are attempting to. Like, I don't remember the name of it, but there's that whole cryptocurrency which is about you kind of renting out your Wi-Fi and providing like proof of providing coverage and stuff like that.
Oh, there's a ton of
That's an
those.
example of something.
There's a ton of companies that actually do that.
Right, yeah, and you can see how that's just a really obvious thing. I mean, it already comes with a decentralized model. There are Wi-Fi routers everywhere. They're naturally decentralized in some sense, right? So that's nice. But then you're actually providing real value to people, and you can just see how there are ways in which crypto networks can do this. It's just not clear how they do this. I read something the other day. Somebody had said on Twitter, like 99% of the crypto space is like grifts and scams right now, and 1% are real projects trying to do real good in the world. I don't know if I buy those percentages, but you kind of get the point, right? But at some point, we will emerge away from those 99%. That 1% will grow and they'll start taking over, because I think grifts and scams, they all have a limited shelf life, right? Like, unless you can keep reinventing your grift and scam and keep scamming people, probably you're going to end up disappearing or running away into the sunset, or whatever the heck it is they do with their money at some point. And then, in theory, the real utility, the real good crypto projects can emerge. That's the hope, right? And that's why I'm still on the bus.
Well, like you said, I'm glad you're on the bus, first of all, and I'm glad to see you're one of the main drivers on the main routes. What I can tell you is that you're right. Having a scam, I just want to put my 2 cents here on this one.
Please do.
Having a scam for many people has been very lucrative. Whether you're purportedly alive or dead, i.e. Gerald Cotton, whether you're Ruya Ignatova from OneCoin, where there's still billions and billions missing. And as far as I know, they still haven't hauled her in, even though they've got her brother and I think her lover. But the whole point is that there's still a heck of a lot of scams out there. And what's even more important is that the scams not necessarily have to do with also like crypto platforms or crypto projects as such, but
like DeFi and stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of... That's another podcast you and I
another rabbit hole.
That's another rabbit hole. Yeah, there's a lot of them here, but it's just, crypto does get quite tainted with even things like something like 99% of the crypto wallets that say that they're raising money for the Ukraine are they're just scams. So there's people who are donating. It was something over 100 million in crypto has now been donated to Ukrainian help funds, and that money is going to pockets that are nowhere, they're never going to see what that money was intended for by the user or by the person who donated. So, and this is...
I vaguely remember even Vitalik, right? Vitalik Buterin of Ethereum fame. He tweeted something about, be careful of these wallets, when the Ukraine crisis first hit, that were being touted as the wallets to send funds to, and then like 20 minutes later or something, he was like, "Oh no, I've confirmed these wallets are okay." Now that's Vitalik, right? Like you probably don't get many more people who should be clued in than him, I would say. And if you and I are arguably well versed in the space, and we were cautious about these, like I looked at all of these things saying, "Please send crypto here," and I thought I have no way to validate the authenticity of any of this, right?
Nope.
Yeah, so I ran a mile from that. I gave money through the Disasters Emergency Committee website. Like that was the DEC. That was the only thing that I could probably get any trust in, right? That I could, plausibly think was going to use those funds the way that I intended them.
Well, one day...
I just virtue signaled, haven't I? I didn't mean that.
No, no, that's not
I
virtue.
donated so much money.
No, let me just tell you something. First of all, it's not virtue signaling. We're talking about something that's absolutely valid. But I will say something, and I'm thinking about actually coming out with a new podcast series on top of this one, because I want to talk about like real life stuff that's allied to crypto. But I will mention this. I volunteered for a charity in their marketing department. They said they needed some marketing experts to come in. And so I put my CV in and they chose me. I quit after 4 months, after I saw what was going on behind the scenes. And I saw how much money, I saw how much the salaries were that the people were... by the way, I was a volunteer, you have to remember, right? I had a full-time job, and then what I would do is there was certain hours, like my lunch hours, I would donate, as well as also after work, as well as also on weekends. I would donate my time to helping with creating more robust marketing plans, et cetera, to obviously get more money into the charity, and also to help with the raising of the profile of the events where people would obviously, like for instance, abseiling, where people would raise money and, so highlighting all this stuff. And I couldn't stomach it. So I actually, the only way I donate now, to be quite frank with you, Ryan, is I actually give food directly to food banks. We're talking like I will bring.
So it can't be spent on something else. It's food. They're not going to go to the trouble of turning it into money and then using that money. That is such a troubling thing, right? And I think that speaks to what we're talking about more broadly, which is human nature. If crypto has highlighted anything to me, it's that human nature is sometimes not great, right? All of the crypto scams that exist and whatnot are just serve to underline that fact. And I'm not saying that charity necessarily scamming, but they become these complex organizations all of their own that have costs and essentially wasted money and whatnot. And I have this kind of thing, this belief, which is that organizations are kind of like organisms themselves, right? And they seek to protect themselves. They somehow develop their own kind of consciousness, if you will, and find ways to, gloriously fritter away money and whatnot. And I think that's a huge shame. And I'm not saying that human beings are all bad or not altruistic or something like that. I'm just saying that there's something wrong with the systems of incentive in our societies that drive people towards these sort of actions. The printing press democratized knowledge, right? And the internet democratized publishing. It became zero marginal cost for anyone to publish anything on the internet. And there's I have a strong belief that crypto has kind of democratized the ability to scam and grift people. It's really, really cynical take, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's not. It's honest. It's an honest take. And this is and this is actually how Crypto and Blockchain Talk actually started and still remains to this day, is an educational platform to help people understand. And even if they're long in the tooth, in other words, they're very serious and seasoned in this whole crypto sphere and they understand what it's about, people still get taken in. Shoot, I know really well-known people who, really, friends of mine
up there
who should have known better, and they went into and it's been really weird because we'd meet for dinner, and I'd be like, what, I'd be listening, I'd be listening to these latest quote unquote projects that they've invested in. I'm like, have you really had a good look at the back end? Have you had a really good look at the people who are behind that? Have you, and I understand.
Gosh, I really feel you.
And nobody can argue with me the fact that yes, there are some anonymous projects that have done very well. In other words, people haven't been identified. We don't know who they are, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, the biggest one is Bitcoin. We still don't know really who Satoshi Nakamoto is, even though I really do honestly.
Is it you?
Yes, I am Satoshi Nakamoto. Everyone, kneel before me, everyone.
It was your accent that gave you away. To be honest.
Absolutely, yes. Me and the FBI invented it. No.
What's your theory on him? What do you think him or her or they
No,
is?
I really know who it is.
Oh, great, good.
I'm happy to tell you who it is.
Please do, yes.
It's David Kleeman from West Palm Beach, Florida. He's now deceased. And if you don't know who
I think I've read about this guy. Yes.
Well, I knew it was David way before anyone even sniffed. And do you know what gave it away? The lawsuit, as well as his life story. You need to read about his life story. You need to understand. It's a sad story.
You can direct me out of band at some stuff to read because I'd like to know. I think I did read something about him because I remember reading about a guy who had died and was thought by some to be the founder. But,
well, I've said this I've said this for the longest time, even when no one understood anything about what was going on. And it's as sad a story, believe it or not, as Alan Turing. That
is the saddest story.
No. Wait.
Unassailably my hero because I'm a computer scientist at heart and training. No.
I got to tell you something. Yeah. He's got a when you read the story.
Is it going to compete? Oh.
It's a very tight first place. You can't say once. They're both so tragic. And I've actually dedicated. I've written 7 books. Okay,
Yep.
I think there's 6 on Amazon. I don't think the 7th has been
I've
released
not
yet.
written one, so I feel like I need a lot of imposter syndrome.
Well,
Well done.
why?
This is
Why
about
would
me,
you have
it's about you.
imposter syndrome? We're about to go into what you do for a living. You're amazing. So I'm not even going to
thank you.
listen to you on that. Okay, you're an amazing person. But
Yep.
I dedicated one of my books to Alan Turing,
Oh wow.
and I dedicated more than one podcast to Dave
Wow.
Kleiman or Kleeman.
Okay.
I've dedicated more than one podcast to Dave, and I honestly, in my
Yeah.
heart of hearts, and after thousands, and by the way, somebody will now steal this for Netflix, because I got to tell you something. We reported on Quadriga CX really early on, from literally the moment it started to. I remember reading the message that Quadriga CX put on their own website. That's how early in on this thing we were. And
Wow.
I think that, and now somebody's going to come out with another Netflix. I'm telling you, Netflix is listening to this freaking podcast. I'm telling you they are. Well, I know the SEC and the CFTC.
How long before Netflix release a coin? Surely they've got a shit coin in the works, right? I'd be surprised.
Oh, well,
if they
I'm not
haven't.
being funny, but you do know that Starbucks is coming out with not just coins, but NFTs. We know
I
that
didn't actually.
it's
I'm not
sad.
surprised.
Yeah, they're having they're doing an NFT collection, and they're also looking into doing a whole. But of course they would, because think about it.
How do we feel about NFTs? Like, I have my take. I'd like to know yours.
Okay, I'll go first.
You go first.
I'll go first, only because I don't want anyone to say, "Oh, he's just agreeing with everything she says." So you might disagree with me. Okay, so
Well, then maybe I should go first.
okay, you go first.
I'll go first. Well, so I think they're the grift of grifts, right? They are sadly, of no utility and value, and I'm deeply hurt by that. I think because there was the possibility, I think, and potential for NFTs to be something so much more, and to really be of something of real value to artists. Artists, the first ones to kind of take hold of it, as we all know. But you could really see how they could provide utility and value. Perhaps if an NFT, and I'm sure some out there do this, I'm sure that's something I've read about, but if they afforded you rights to copyrights and things like that, so that you legally actually were afforded some utility and value, they'd be amazing. But right now, they're just a URL wrapped up in a token, like in a smart contract, that points to some web server somewhere that might not contain any particular picture or anything. I'm very sad. I think there's the obfuscation there, just confuses anyone who I know who talks about these things. They're confused about what they are. They think they should be buying them because they feel like they're missing out. There's this sense of FOMO going on all the time. And it just deeply saddens me, because there's a lot of people who are saying, crypto generally is a grift, and I think that's sad. But there's some truth to it, and can't ignore that. But now you've got these things built off of that, sort of one step removed, and they're a grift. So a grift times grift. I don't know if I'm using the word grift correctly.
You are.
Thanks. I'm
No worries.
overusing it. And that's just a really sad thing, because I just think now we're creating this whole ecosystem of confusion and scam and stuff like that, and people are just getting hurt, right? You read about them all the time. They're losing money and stuff like that because they're not hearing those warnings, those disclaimers. I am not a financial advisor, please don't take this advice. And it really hurts me, because I think NFTs have so much potential as a technology. If I could trade a NFT that represented real property, like land or something like that, and know that when I transfer that NFT to you, Aviva, the land registry in whichever country we're in will recognize that instantly and immediately, and do all the appropriate paperwork under the hood. That's something with real value. That's something amazing, right? And I just don't see much of that. Oh, rant over. I just need to get that off my chest.
Okay.
Are
Now you
we
want
in
my
a calm space again?
Do you
Yeah,
want?
your take.
Do you want my take
This is
on
where
it?
we discover we completely disagree.
I couldn't have said it better myself. You
Oh,
have chosen
okay.
every word and every syllable I would have said. Not a word. You didn't miss a beat.
Very kind.
And it's incredible that now you obviously have not listened to my podcast called I Was Screwed on OpenSea. And I have many other podcasts, and I've done podcasts as well with lawyers who represent NFT creators, et cetera, et cetera. It is a very worrying. I agree with you about about the whole thing being a very dubious undertaking, especially when we're still in a very precarious place when it comes to crypto. And I think that there's going to be, and I have this debate a lot. Believe it or not, I still have one friend or two in the world where, where they still haven't, they still want to speak to me because I have very interesting opinions like yours. And I just say, listen, all it's going to take is for one regulator to say, in the United States, for instance, to say, okay, because you do know that there's regulation afoot for not just NFTs, but for DeFi and crypto in general, et cetera, et cetera. Everything you can think of.
Yeah.
Oh, and I don't mean just regulated. I mean, like, they've already announced they want to find a minimum, that's called a minimum of $11 billion in terms of tax money from crypto tradings. And from what has also been understood, there's already like some test cases going on where they've already subpoenaed or requested names from crypto exchanges in the United States where they're going to be comparing these people's names. They're going to be comparing the people's names to their tax claim, to their 1040s.
Oh wow! So that's coming.
And that's
this would come.
Someone's going to really be bent over a barrel in a minute, and I got to tell you something. It's going to it's going to be
painful.
Oh, it's going to be very painful. But the Chinese government, as we know, they banned crypto mining.
Yep. How's that gone? Do you know? Like, I'm assuming they banned it, but like, how many people are really obeying is kind of the thing I was wondering.
Okay, we're talking about China. It's not a place you want to disobey. Okay?
CCP are pretty good at enforcing.
It's not like Sweden where you say, okay, I've broken the law, and then they give you, a gift basket. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Am I right? You can't even hold crypto if you're a Chinese citizen now. Is that right?
I'm not sure about that. I'm pretty sure plenty of Chinese citizens have a lot of crypto. It's
for sure.
just really about, so far, from what I understand, the mining. But now it seems that there's the Chinese federal government, the Chinese government and
CCP.
I
think that's what they called.
It's the people's. It's a PRC. That's what it is.
That's it.
Yeah. So the PRC and the Chinese Internet Finance Association in China, they launched a joint initiative now to prevent NFT related risks. Now, that is interesting. Yeah. So basically, they are, or maybe it's 3 of their governing bodies. But anyway, the people in power in China are seeking to prevent any securitization of NFTs and ensure they're not tied to any financial products. So they're basically going to be clamping down on the NFT marketplace in general, it looks like, because I got to tell you something, there is a world of hope out there for NFTs. NFTs actually could be bound into something which is incredibly useful, like you said, land transactions or just transactions of there's just so much that can be done. But this thing with artwork, and I really want to tell this story again. I know I've told this before on the podcast, but I just will do a very short version.
I haven't heard it.
Okay, well, that's good. I actually decided to test drive when NFTs first really came out. I decided to test drive. Well, actually, that's not true. It's not when NFTs first came out. It's when OpenSeas first opened. I decided to test drive in an auction. I decided to test drive an auction. I lost the auction. I ended up paying so much in gas fees that I was totally beeped. And all I can tell you is that it was the worst feeling in my life because I just let it ride, you see. And I didn't realize that every time it would try to do the bid, it would take more gas fees. Anyway, the whole point is I ended up paying over £300 for something I didn't even win. And it's all because I didn't read the small print.
Yeah.
It is
that's the thing though, isn't it, right? Getting scuppered by these details is kind of where the industry's at, right? There's a lot of details and there's a lot of scuppery to be had, and people do just get scuppered in so many ways. Like, just the amount of times I'm reading on Twitter or wherever, like, somebody who's been caught out by some edge case or situation, and we only have to think about the bugs in smart contracts and things like that and how many people have been screwed over by those. Like, it's a really sad state of affairs. I don't think it's unrecoverable or anything like that. I think we're in the Wild Wild West, right?
We are.
Yeah. And regulation, I know it's decried by like your Bitcoin maximalists and people like that, but it may not be a terrible thing. It's going to hurt a bunch of people, yeah, for sure. A lot of people are going to get caught out, I suspect. I suppose they might have some sort of period in which you can, like an amnesty period, declare your holdings and get your tax affairs straight so that you don't get completely screwed. But then if it's the US leading the way, probably not then. They might well just go straight with suing people.
Absolutely.
But I do think it's recoverable. And if I want to be a bit more positive about the whole crypto space, the amount of experimentation that goes on is exciting sometimes. Like some of the DeFi projects that I read about can barely get my head around. But because they're basically creating reasonably interesting financial instruments with weird, complex behaviors and whatnot, and that's cool. Like I'm a builder, I'm an engineer first and foremost. I spent most of my life writing code and stuff like that, and thinking about it's this job really. It's working for IOV42 that's really got me excited about what I guess is now being called social technology or socio-technology, which is that intersection between people and technology and how those kind of things scale up to achieve outcomes, right? That to me is where this could all be really exciting, and regulation may well be the thing that cuts away a lot of the junk, shall we say, in the kind of whole crypto space. And there's a lot of it out there. Once scammers are forced to register or a business or something like that, I suppose it makes it much harder to be a scammer that doesn't get prosecuted down the road. So it may not be a terrible thing. The flip side is, like, I absolutely love some of the philosophical underpinnings of, say, Bitcoin and things like that. The idea of transcending the nation state, right? The only reason regulation works in the nation state is because the state has the monopoly on violence, right? At the end of the day, when the rubber hits the road, they're the ones that can turn up at your house with guns and truncheons and force you to comply, right? And that's how our worlds work. And I'm sure there's a lot of us who don't love that sometimes that balance of power is abused or tips too far one way or whatnot. And so thinking about how these technologies can be used to create better systems is very exciting. And that's, when I got on the bus because I was a distributed systems engineer who some friends came to me and they said, hey, we're working with this company as consultants. They need some help building out their dream. Do you want to come do that? And I was just like, what is it? They're like, it's do we use the term crypto then? It's like 4 years ago now.
Yeah.
They said it's a blockchain technology, to which I think I replied, I don't care. Like, I'm not interested in that kind of thing. Well, it's just a linked list. Okay, cool. But they persuaded me, and I reluctantly came along, right? But it was the distributed systems problem was what got me there. They had something interesting distributed systems challenge. How can we build something that's basically a slightly different take on a lot of blockchain technologies? But I'd probably been there 6 months or maybe even a year, I don't know, before I drank the Kool-Aid and started buying some of the philosophy, right? And I was like, yeah, we could think about how we can replace a lot of our aging institutions with digital versions of those, right? It's all well and good having a global financial system that circumvents nation states and regulation, right? Except that some of that regulation is really important, right?
Yeah, of course.
Like the ability to have just if you've been scammed is like really useful.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to have payments reversed if there's a mistake made is really useful. A lot of the institutions that exist in society have evolved over generations because there was a need for them. And it just sort of feels to me like maybe the crypto communities are really only waking up now to the idea that we're going to have to recreate all of this, right? I don't think you can have a blockchain that does all of this stuff well without having those institutions. And then the maximalists will look at that and go, well, okay, maybe what we need to do is just create a smart contract that is your adjudication court when there's a dispute, or a smart contract that does X, Y, Z, whatever kind of institutional thing you might think you need in order to make the system work better. But the problem with like just having raw smart contracts and things do that is smart contracts are not humans, right? They don't account for all of those, dare I say, messy biological concerns that we have, the edge cases that you just can't code every single edge case into a smart contract, right? You need people in the loop. You need literally arbitration panels to hear evidence on both sides and make decisions and things like that, Or the alternative is you allow a small group of people to fork your DAO and completely undo a whole bunch of history, which kind of flies in the face of the whole philosophy of blockchains, right? Anyway, I feel like I just ranted a lot there.
it's obvious you're a bit of a genius. You know, you've been
Oh, no, definitely not.
Listen,
I'm
you've
a
been
hard worker, maybe.
you obviously were locked away on your council estate coding from a young age. It's obvious.
That is true, yes.
You very much sound like a very, very, very technical version of my other half. Listen, I'm really confused on two fronts.
Cool. Yeah.
First of all, you work for a company where I've got my finger on the pulse here like nobody's business.
Uh-huh.
And I've never heard of you, right?
Yeah, we get that.
I mean, yeah, but that's not a good thing to get. But
No.
what I'm also confused about is that you are the guy who wrote the code.
Oh, I didn't write this code.
Oh, you didn't write that.
But I did architect it.
Okay,
to a large
so
degree.
so you're the
And I
okay.
did build the team that's built the code, and I did do a lot of that.
I mean, I think I know what IOV stands for, but I want you to say it. But why IOV42?
So IOV stands for Internet of Value. The 42, it's hotly debated internally where that came from, which is a bit weird. At this point, I like to just tell people that it's from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in which the solution to the universe is 42. I don't believe that is the real origins of it. It may have been.
I like it.
Yeah, let's just go with it, right? Like at this point, like it's lost to the sands of time why 42 is in there. But the original concept was, how can we build an internet of value? And it was directly in response to what was happening with Bitcoin at the time. So we're talking 4 years ago, I think, when the company was founded, a bit longer, maybe 5. And essentially, I think the hot take was these technologies are really, really cool. Why aren't businesses, governments, and whatnot just jumping on board and just saying we're going to build everything on these technologies, right? That was the head kind of caused this company to come into being and investors to get on board and stuff like that. And so so you ask the question, like, why is it that we aren't better known or whatnot? In a lot of ways, like, we are drowned out, I think, by the noise of just generally the crypto ecosystem. We don't build that has a coin in it. We don't blick chain. We are not a coin shill to your friends or whatever, and so you're not going to make a big buck out of us, on that whole speculative kind of bubble or whatever. So we just kind of quietly in the background. Also, we're not like targeting, shall we say, the general public to come and use our technology. Our technology is really about enabling businesses, enterprises, all of that kind of stuff to build technologies, to build their use cases, to build the things that matter to them, that enable them to integrate and interact with other people in their market or their ecosystem in a way that's kind of seamless, automated, and completely relevant to them, and that also layers in a whole load of trust, right? So there's a lot of buzzwords there. Like, if I was to drill it down into kind of like concrete, real things, I hate talking in the abstract too much, right? So one of the first things we looked at, we kind of dreamed up this technology. We basically said, okay, why is it governments and enterprises don't want to use these sorts of things? There's a reason your government or regulated or business use cases and regulated on a public blockchain, right? That's really, really tricky to do. There are lots of people who've tried to figure out how to do that, and by using like side chains and stuff, so you can keep the data private, so that it's contained in an enclave. That means that it's not completely publicly, out there. That thing. But we kind of looked at it and we said, well, is there a way we can build a technology that supports the needs of businesses and whatnot who need to keep data private and contained, and they need to be able to hold it according to rules and be sure that those rules have been obeyed the whole time through whatever process that data goes through. And so we kind of dreamed up a technology which was targeted to them. And the way it works, it's essentially a data center technology, because we immediately saw that any government that wants to use a technology like ours is going to need that technology to scale to potentially the size of the country that they're in or whatever. So immediately you see how Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of those public blockchains, they have scalability concerns that make this really, really tricky. So we had to kind of radically rethink things. So we thought about it and we kind of came up with the idea, well, there's a whole bunch of approaches to scaling distributed systems technologies that are kind of, at this point, hardened, tested, understood. There's a whole bunch of technologies you can just use and leverage to make that less hard for yourself, shall we say. I don't want to say easy. It's not been an easy journey, but it's definitely less hard. But we looked at all that, and we're all a bunch of distributed systems engineers, so we worked in lots of different places, but the financial sector of the UK, that kind of stuff. And most of us had worked on specifically scaling big bank technologies that have to process enormous amounts of data and stuff like that. Myself and Chief Product Officer at IOV42, a guy called David Coleman, we both worked at a large bank on a large project. I have to be careful what I say there.
Yeah.
That came about at the end of the 2008 financial crash. So what came out of the 2008 financial crash was Bitcoin. That's one thing that came out. But also a whole load of regulation happened in the EU around banks having to understand how much risk they were taking and making sure that they had enough capital on hand to cover that risk, right? So we were instrumental in scaling to like that, and we worked really hard on things like that. So we kind of came to this organization and said, well, we know how to build like scalable technologies that you can just keep throwing more hardware at it and it'll just keep going faster, right? And so that's what we attempted to build. Little did we know, setting about that journey, how hard that would be, because actually some of the unique properties of blockchains make that quite a tricky thing to do. But we did develop this technology, and now we have it, but it's really targeted in just a different way. We don't envisage this technology being something that, mum and pop install on their home computer, like mum and pop maybe were envisaged to do with Bitcoin and whatnot, although, right now actually hosting a full node is like quite a serious undertaking for anyone. But we don't envisage it being that. We envisage it being run by organizations, enterprises who have a need to build a network amongst them, maybe their competitors or maybe other people in the ecosystem, to do important stuff. So once we'd kind of dreamed this technology up and we'd built it, we proved it, proof of concept, all of that, investors who bought the vision and were willing to kind of fund us to go on this journey, we then had to start thinking about, well, we've dreamed up these ideas. How can the technology actually be used? We had to start thinking about real use cases, right, and testing them with the market. And we've looked at like all sorts of things and at various points through our journey. But actually, like we didn't realize when we embarked upon this that actually figuring out the use cases for blockchain technologies is the big unsolved question. What is the killer app for blockchain, right? Right now, the killer app for blockchain is number go up. So it's speculative gambling on the price of cryptocurrencies. And it's Bored Ape NFTs, right? Like these are the killer apps.
Yeah.
And the question is like, but what are the real killer apps that are going to change society, make society better? Like once you have a system of record that can be shared in some sort of environment, that matters. Let's say one of the first things we looked at was carbon credits, right? Like carbon credits are this really, really complicated space with lots of rules and lots of edge cases and just lots of confusion. And arguably, the reason the carbon credits haven't been successful, this is my opinion, and is probably not shared by lots of people working in that space, but it's just the sheer complexity of that space makes it very, very hard to do business and whatnot. There's somebody growing somewhere, and trees should have credits issued against them for the carbon that they capture that can then be sold to offset carbon usage to organizations that need to do that, right? Immediately, you've got a bunch of different actors in that ecosystem who need to interact with each other and do so in a way that they can completely trust what's going on in that ecosystem. How can I be sure that this carbon credit is actually underpinned by real trees in a real place and I'm not being scammed, that kind of thing? So we started thinking really heavily about like, okay, how can we start to bring these use cases to life, right? So platform, really just a thing, a distributed ledger that can secure anything amongst a small group of nodes that run in data centers, right? That can scale arbitrarily depending on how big your use case is. We had to start really thinking carefully about what are the building blocks that enable people to describe these things. Right now, if you want to build your use case on like a public blockchain, you've got to think about that use case in terms of coins, gas, and smart contracts, right? And this is quite a low-level way of thinking. Like, the way I kind of think of it sometimes is that in programming, software engineers, we have to deal with what we call high-level languages and low-level languages. Low-level languages are ones that are really close to the underlying machine, and they're really, really hard to program in, right? You have to really know the ins and outs of the machine that you're working on, right? And so for that reason, coding in those ways takes a really long time, but it can achieve really incredible things. It can be very fast, that kind of thing. But for that reason, there are these things invented called high-level languages, which are just like, they're much closer to the way that humans think. They have concepts that are not, shall we say, binary. That's a clumsy way of describing it, but I think it's helpful illustration. But they have concepts that we can think about. They model objects and things like that in the real world, so you can write programs very quickly that are meaningful to human beings, right? So I kind of think about the blockchain space right now as having quite a low-level way of describing whatever it is you're trying to build. It's smart contracts, it's coins, it's gas, and you have to try and describe everything within that, right? So being programmers, we looked at this and, had a whole team of smart programmers by this point, and we all looked at this and we said, surely we can do something better. And so we came up with a different way of thinking about it, which is in our platform, you can basically describe things in terms of identities, things in terms of assets. We have unique assets, we have quantifiable assets, we have accounts, we have all of these really high level concepts that make it really easy to describe things like a carbon credit. A carbon credit is a unique asset that has some sort of uniqueness about it. Once we started thinking in that way, and then thinking about how these concepts can allow users or companies or organizations to build whatever it is they're trying to build. So carbon credits is one example. We recently were thinking a lot about the supply chain for coronavirus tests, like lateral flow tests and things, right? Like we were thinking, how can somebody at the end of this story be sure that the lateral flow test that they're taking is a proper lateral flow test, that nothing's crept into the supply chain that's naughty? How can they go through verifying that and know all of the different steps that it kind of flowed through the supply chain to get to them, and then also use that lateral flow test, marking it as not to be used again somewhere in a distributed ledger that everyone can trust, at the same time as keeping user data private, secure, and safe? These are all really hard questions, but it turns out they're really fun ones. So we basically did a lot of dreaming and a lot of building, and we kind of got to a point where we had a bunch of things designed and ready to go, and then we had the $1 million question, which was, how do we find people who actually want to use a technology like this? We spent a lot of time talking to people who thought they needed a blockchain to solve their problems, and it turns out they didn't need a blockchain to solve their problems, right? They could just use a database.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you know how it is. Like once a company's been around long enough, for some reason you end up kind of sitting down with all of your team and working out what your values are and writing them down. Like there just seems to be some sort of law that probably doesn't have a name about companies that means you go on this journey. I'm hugely skeptical of these sorts of exercises, because I think what happens is you write down a bunch of values and principles that you think your company should be or should hold to, and then no one obeys them at all. But we did this exercise, but rather than do it that way around, the person that kind of led us through the exercise basically tried to distill down what values and whatnot we already held, right, in order to kind of figure out, well, what actually matters to you right now, rather than trying to invent values that you might try to aspire to and achieve. Like, what is the things that make you who you are, that are positive, right? And one of the key things that came out of this whole period for us was integrity, right? So for one, we've built a technology which is really predicated on the concept of integrity. It's all about the ability for somebody to be able to cryptographically prove how an entire use case in some business world played out, and prove that it followed all the rules and everything was as it should be, and more than that, that it's actually impossible for the rules not to have been obeyed, right? Like that's quite powerful. That's quite I guess a step forwards. But also, like, once you realize you're building a technology that's all about integrity, well, your technology needs to be trusted, and that means you need to be trusted. And that means we had to have a lot of conversations with organizations who are like, yeah, we need a blockchain. We've heard about a blockchain. Blockchain's cool. And you talk them through it, you talk through their use case, and then at the end of the day you go, you do not need a blockchain to solve your problem. You just need a database, and you'll be fine, right? And there's a lot of that. And we had a lot of painful searching around in the market to try and find people who really needed a technology like this. And at first, that's a really slow process. It's a blind search, right? It's like essentially just knocking on random doors and saying, does this seem like something you could use?
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we went with it. But we've since then, we've managed to find traction that really.
From who? Like who?
Work.
Who? When you went knock, like,
Yeah.
give an example of like when you went knocking on the door, they said, "Yeah, this is something we want."
So I don't remember how it happened, or who encountered them, or if they came to us, or or what it was exactly. But
Yeah.
partnered with a couple of organisations in the timber supply chain space, shall we say. Now, so in the whole timber space, there's a strong emphasis on knowing where the timbers come from and that it's not come from illegal sources, right? We're moving into this world which is all about, like, how can we achieve our sustainability goals as a species? And it's not clear that this is a very easy problem to solve. We're thinking about climate change as a species, and we're all signed up, all our nations are signed up to these pledges to reduce carbon output to 1.5 to 2%. But it's not really clear, like, how we can kind of enforce that sort of thing. So this happens at the macro scale, nation states, but it's also happening all the way down at like individual companies who actually are controlling forests, cutting down timber legally, and then selling it into a supply chain. It's flowing through the supply chain. There's importers, exporters, there's IKEA at the end building flipping wardrobes, I guess. I guess that's what IKEA build.
No, that's what you build with IKEA.
I'm actually sitting on an IKEA bed right now that is about 50. I had it since I was an undergraduate, right? So that's ridiculous. And it creaks really badly. Probably be on the recording.
This is definitely not a good advert for IKEA. Keep going.
Sorry, IKEA. Yeah. So there's the certifiers in this ecosystem whose job it is to certify that sawmills in this ecosystem are producing wood legally and responsibly, and they basically, they audit them and they give their thumbs up and their rubber stamp and whatnot, and then it flows through a supply chain. And really, the name of the game is, how can anyone in that supply chain know that all the rules were followed up until the point at which they're receiving the goods into their part before they do whatever they're doing to add value to the goods and sending it on in the supply chain, right? That consists of lots of paperwork, right, as you can imagine. And documents are kind of scanned and faxed. I believe faxing is still a part of this ecosystem. I didn't realize faxes even still existed. But there's this really old-fashioned way of doing it. And this organization, Preferred by Nature, who we're partnered with, I'm pretty sure I can say by name at this point, they're a certifier, and their job is to make sure that wood in this ecosystem, is conforming to the rules, and they're taking the line to enforce that. They had a visionary person in that organization who kind of realized that we could build a digital ecosystem for doing this, but if you put garbage into a digital ecosystem, what's to make sure, or how can you enforce that data, how can you trust that data is the bottom line. That's the name of the game, really. And they started looking for a blockchain technology that could essentially make sure that once data is entered into the ecosystem, that it follows a set of rules that make sure as it evolves through different people who take those goods through the supply chain, everything's kosher, shall we say, and good and groovy. And so they were the first one. They could see the value. They had real need, and they needed to remove all of these messy processes that they had and produce and use something that could really change their world. So we built that for them, with them, trying to understand their use case and really trying to prove to ourselves, is this thing we've built actually of use to anybody? And, of course I'm going to say this on this podcast, but we did discover that, yes, this is a good thing and people need this, and they are over the moon, with what we've done. The sawmill at the other end of that, who were the guinea pig, are very happy with the whole process. And of course, that's now been something that we've proven ourselves with, and now we're having conversations with lots of other people who are. So not only do we have this one very simple part of a timber ecosystem kind of on the blockchain, so to speak, but we now also have other players who want to come in. So there are other sawmills, there are other importers, and we're working with them to help them build out what they want to do. And right now, this is largely us doing the building, but the goal for us is to get to the point where these organizations can do the building on our technology themselves, and that's kind of where we're heading. And it's not just timber. We're now talking, you can use our building blocks, our Lego bricks, to build whatever you want to build, right? But yeah, so our model enables you to model identities using things we call claims and endorsements, which are just basically cryptographically provable things that you might want to say about your identity on the blockchain. So I might have an identity backed by keys on the blockchain, and I might say my identity, is over the age of 18 or whatever, and that's a claim I'd make. That claim is reasonably meaningless, but it can be cryptographically endorsed, which is just a digital signature, right? That's then captured on the blockchain. But that digital signature basically says it could be from who would endorse you for being over 18. I don't know, your government in your country might say, yes, this person is over 18, or has a valid driver's license, or is allowed to skydive on a Tuesday, or whatever the heck it is that kind of matters in your story, your use case, in your world. We can model that on identities and enable people to present those aspects of their identity. So a student in Australia who wants to go and work at some place that requires them to have a minimum of a bachelor's in literature, say, they can present that thing. So that's self-sovereign identity, right? That's something that the W3C, who designed the internet, kind of have built or have been designing for a long time. As is like a more basic version of that, you could actually implement the W3C spec using our technology, and it all just works. We in fact did some proof of concept work with them around that, and it works.
Wow.
So it's very cool. But not only that, right? Like, so these claims and endorsements, you can have them on identities that represent people, but you can also have them on the assets that you've represented in our system. So if you create an asset that represents a horse that you want to trade or whatever, you're a horse trader, let's say. Not sure what. Yeah, we have this thing in our organization. All of the kind of high-level architectural design documents that we write that kind of specify, how we're going to build something. They always use this
Horse
character,
trading.
Trevor the horse.
Yeah.
Well, specifically Trevor the horse is the unique asset. So it's kind of like a company trope at this point.
Right.
So that's why. But you can actually put these claims and endorsements on a horse, right? So the horse racing organization can endorse a claim, this is a racehorse, on that horse. So we've kind of extended that identity modeling technology to assets themselves. This kind of stuff gives you a really rich language in which to dream about how to build your business case, and on top of that, we're building in our own take on smart contracts, which are very different to smart contracts as they exist in the world now, that enable you to build behavior into assets. An asset that does something when someone tries to transfer it, or an asset that does something when someone creates a claim on it or tries to destroy it, something like that, or enforces certain business logic. So we're pretty, I think, bullish about what it is we've invented at this point, because we're now starting to see that people really want to use it. And for us, we're just doubling down as much as we can on the whole timber and commodity ecosystem, because that's where we see real need, right? They have a real need for a technology like ours. So we're just going to focus there, and then we will start wondering about where else it can go, right? For a while, we were like, are we just building blockchain as a service, but maybe with slightly more usable kind of API than what blockchain has? And we explored that, right? That's one of the areas we kind of went down and pivoted away from. So we have this idea of a small number of nodes in a very particular space coming together, run by different organizations for that decentralization, to build some sort of use case, right? So you could imagine a whole bunch of vineyards running these nodes in the cloud, probably. Maybe there's 5 vineyards, 5 nodes, and they form together what we call a zone, right? This zone thing is their wine consumers to, prove the authenticity of wine or whatever the heck it is, maybe even buy wine, I don't know, like all these different things they can build, and they can come together to build that market, right? Now that's one example. Maybe there's another zone somewhere else which is all around, has automotive manufacturers, car manufacturers who build that zone, and maybe what you're doing is trading cars, or maybe you're attesting to the, what do you call it, like the green credentials of your car. You have like emissions tests. There we go, that kind of thing. Maybe that's what the purpose of that. We don't have this idea of like one zone to rule them all and that covers the entire globe, right? Indeed, that's completely into our concept, our model. And the car manufacturers want to come together to form zones because they sit in a very specific regulatory environment. Their data might have to sit in a geographic location, or might have to conform to other rules and have regulatory scrutiny that pertains to what it is they're doing, right? So you see this kind of idea where all these different zones kind of spring up for different purposes. Well, so the EU are really interested in having a digital product passport use case. So you can track product from its creation all the way through its kind of ownership cycle to the ultimate destruction and recycling of the various components and whatnot in it. So you can see how you have all these different zones come together. And this is a little bit like how the internet emerged, right? The internet started out as a whole bunch of disconnected networks for different purposes in different academic institutions, largely, around the world. The internet became interesting once they started connecting these networks together and started saying, hey, what can we now do? What can we achieve now we connect them together? That's our vision. We're not software as a service. We are providing a technology that could enable these networks to appear and then network together, so network of networks, just like the internet did. And so the name Internet of Value starts to take on real meaning then, because what is it that these networks are doing differently? Well, they are the source of truth around things that bring value. Is my car up to scratch for emissions test? Is this wine authentic? Is this pair of Louis Vuitton handbags. Why would you buy a pair? I don't know what I'm saying.
Believe me, you want to buy a pair of them.
Is this authentic, right? Like, it's all about enabling this whole layer of the internet that really has been missing to emerge. And the reason, a lot of people don't want to build solutions to these problems using public blockchain technologies as they stand right now is because they're global, right? Your use case just might not allow you to have your data replicated across a global network that means it's now sitting in China. I think that's pretty reasonable.
Yeah. So Maersk has been using supply chain software for a long time. There was actually like a supply chain conference years and years ago in Latvia, which I remember. And so supply chain software, which is actually blockchain-based supply chain software. I mean, it has been actually around for some time. What is it then that IOV42 does that is different in terms of their supply chain software?
I don't have the details of those particular solutions, but I'm going to guess at those solutions a little bit, right? So this could just be really wrong, but you can imagine that those solutions are probably very tailored towards a specific space, a specific problem. I periodically will find myself on like a call with somebody who's done something very similar. And you find that what they've done is they've taken something like Hyperledger, Besu or something like that, and they've built a very specific solution for their problem. What we're doing fundamentally that's different, we enable a technology that enables them all to be equal stakeholders in this, right? The trouble is, you with maybe some other solutions, I'd imagine, there you go, just my disclaimer there, is that you have Maersk essentially holding all of the data, and Maersk essentially running the network, and so it's not really truly shared amongst all of the players in the ecosystem. I could be wrong about that. I don't actually know exactly how that was built. Our technology requires that buy-in from stakeholders from kind of across the industry. So that's kind of one aspect of it. It's about bringing people together to say, what is it we share? What are our common values? How is it we can benefit our customers mutually? And that might be building a market, right? And that's kind of what our technology enables them to do. Market's quite an odd word. Like, I almost want a looser word than that because it's not always a market. It's sometimes just the transfer of things. No, maybe it's a market. But then the flip side is we also provide this modeling language, these assets, identities, claims, endorsements, all of this rich stuff that enable them to really quickly come up with solutions to what it is they're trying to build. And we think like the two together is really the secret sauce. It's really what appealed to the people we're working with so far. The idea is, if you think about it, like, so we're running this Timber network right now. When another player comes into the Timber network, they spin up a node and they join this permissioned blockchain, and they're now equal stakeholders. They are securing the data. They are part of it, and therefore they're receiving the value from it. There's a nice thing about that. There's a nice synergy with it, right? We're at the moment as an organization having to really dig into what are the governance structures that enable these organizations to work together. And we're still working on this because it's actually a really thorny problem. It's one that we've picked up and put down a number of times because the answers aren't obvious. But we're starting to lean towards the idea that they form cooperatives together. Like that, there's something very nice about the idea that you're coming together with shared values to benefit people and create systems of incentive that bring about goods, right? So we haven't really talked about that, but the dream for this technology for us is that you can describe your use case, but you can also describe the systems of incentive that should bring about good behaviors, So, but if we try to think a little bit about the good of cryptographic technologies, right? They're a store of truth, but they can also incentivize you to do good things, One of the core concepts of IOV42 is around enticing governments and enterprise to use a technology like this. They won't build their solution on Bitcoin, right? But they might build their solution using a private network that grows and connects to other networks and enables them to have that kind of peace of mind that their data is needed to be, is regulated, is private, all of that kind of stuff, right? We're on the same page actually, and maybe I'd like to think I'm on the doer side of this. I'm not entirely convinced that we have the solution that would ultimately be used by lots of organizations in the world to solve some of these problems, but maybe. And our product guy, Dave, he's thought about this problem in some depth of how can you use a blockchain to know that the information you're receiving on the internet or on a social network is true, right? He's thought a lot about the kind of reputation systems and stuff like that could be built and how you might go about it. And It's complicated. Like, it requires so much thinking, and not only that, like, once you come up with the idea, you've got to then try and think about all of the ways in which unintended harms can emerge. You know, I don't believe that anyone at Google or Facebook or Microsoft who was just working their day to day intended some of the harms that the technologies that they've wrought on the world have
But
brought
they
about.
have to be stupid not to realize. Really.
Yes and no. Like,
Yeah.
so the like button, right? The like button is, I think a lot of people now realize the like button was a really dangerous technology, right? Because it enabled people to get their sense of self-worth from a number.
Mm-hmm.
And that's incredibly dangerous, incredibly damaging when you reduce someone's self-worth to that. But I don't think when anyone created that like button that they realized like that would be the outcome of that, right? It's especially technologists, sadly, we're not necessarily brilliant at thinking about people and outcomes there, right? We're generally just thinking about, made a shiny new tech, because that's what excites us. So I'm not excusing them, but I think, like, when I went through university and did my sort of computer science undergraduate, I had to do one semester, or not semester, term, on, I don't remember exactly what the course was called, but it was essentially ethics in computing, right? And it was good, but it didn't really touch the sides. And I think probably what we need is to be training generations of technologists who now put ethics and ethical thinking at the core of what they do. It's only and also regulate an industry like mine, so that we hold people to account when they build unethical things. And I can see the harms that technology's caused. So can I turn that gift towards being able to do goods? Great goods with technology, and I think it's possible. It's just not clear to me completely how, but I think about this a lot. Some of my closest colleagues at IOV who are friends from previous jobs as well, we think about this a lot. And so it sort of sounds flippant when you say, Facebook say go fast and break things, and we say, go thoughtfully and try and make things better, but we really believe that, right? Like, with people who can just see the harms that our industry has caused, and we feel responsible, right?
What's the next step that you're taking then with IOV42? What's the next steps?
Really, really good question. Like, what's next for IOV42? So I think, having discovered a use case ecosystem in timber in which we're getting real traction, we're just going to really double down on that. And try and expand into other commodities. We've already, as I think I mentioned earlier, like, gotten interest in other commodity spaces, and we're really keen on just seeing how far we can push that and how far that can grow. But at the same time, we're looking at all sorts of different spaces in which our technology can be used. We've basically got two broad ways of thinking about technology. There's the core platform itself, which we think is broadly applicable to all kinds of usages. But given the state of the kind of crypto world right now, I don't know if you're familiar with the kind of Gartner, I think it's called hype cycle, where you have this kind of trough of disillusionment, and then gradually you kind of come out of that along the slope of enlightenment. And so I think probably we're still in the trough of disillusionment, and there's a lot of projects and noise in the crypto space that makes it hard for maybe us to find the people we want to work with, or for people we want to work with to find technology like ours. So in the process of just gradually kind of working that out and keeping pushing, and hopefully it'll happen, and people will discover that our technology is something that they can use to build a kind of market or an ecosystem to coordinate with their customers.
Well, I really hope that happens for you guys, because I really feel that with you at the helm of the tech, I have a feeling that the only way is up. I honestly mean that. I wish you nothing but the best.
Well, I hope you get to meet more of us, because I think all of my colleagues are very, very lovely people. We've really built a company that I'm quite proud of. We have a culture that I'm very proud of.
How did you guys build this blockchain? Is it proprietary or?
It is proprietary. We built it ourselves. So it uses a bunch of open source technologies. It uses something called Apache Kafka under the hood as the technology we use to make it a really scalable thing.
Oh, nice.
And Apache Kafka is this cool technology that is used by Netflix and people like that to stream, extremely large amounts of data to lots of people simultaneously around the world, that kind of thing. So it's a really well understood technology for building highly scalable systems. So we built on top of that, and we use a programming language called Scala, which for any programmers out there, well, they'll immediately have a reaction to that probably. It's not the most common programming language. It's a little bit, I don't want to say on the fringe. It has very particular reasons why you use it. It's quite a mathematical language. It encourages you to think really rigorously and algebraically about how you do things. And so we chose this reasonably deliberately, because a technology that we're trying to build like ours requires really, let's say, a really low rate of bugs, right? Bugs in a fundamental technology that's all about doing consensus and stuff like that is a really, really big problem. And you've probably, I reckon, recorded podcasts on lots of blockchains out there that have had quite catastrophic bugs and issues and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we went into this with our eyes open saying, okay, well, how can we build in a way that reduces like the chance of us messing up fundamentally? And so I have experience with Scala, and so I kind of knew what you could use Scala for. It just, you know what they say, Aviva? They say that if you're multilingual, you speak other languages, there are certain kinds of thoughts that you can only have in like a certain language. So if you speak French fluently, you might be able to think about a certain thing in a certain way that just doesn't have a translation to English. This is true in programming languages too. And a language like Scala really encourages like a really strong, rigorous mathematical thinking. Flip side of that is it does mean that it takes longer to produce. It means you get a higher quality output. You know, I might have mentioned earlier that we have like values as an organization. Integrity is one of them, right? This speaks to integrity because it's about knowing that we're building something good. But we also have a value, which is we favor quality over speed, which is just like so unpopular to say, especially when you're in a startup as we are. Favoring quality over speed is the sort of thing that people say, like burning through like runway cash, right? Like at the end of the day, if you really want to build something that can have an impact on the world that's positive, rather than a lot of the technologies out there where, you know, it's just about making a quick buck, you've got to do it right, especially a technology like this, which is building a history of transactions and data that needs to stand the test of time. So we spend a lot of time thinking, like really thinking through the implications of what we're building, and Scala really helps with that. And so that's kind of why we went down that road. But it's a data center technology, so there's a whole bunch of components and whatnot. It's not trivial for someone to run our technology. It's not hard. We built it to be pretty easy to deploy and run. But you're not going to have, you know, mum and dad at home deploying our technology on their laptop or their home computer or something like that. It requires like a bit more muscle than that to kind of do what it does. But that's because we're targeting people that need to be able to scale this thing like Netflix scale, something like that.
Oh, wow. So that's just, and you were the person who was the architect of the whole platform.
Yes, and also no, right? Like, I strongly believe when it comes to engineering that, I mean, one, I try to hire people that are smarter than me. That's key, right? Like you should really do that.
Yeah.
It means that I live in constant imposter syndrome, but that's okay. But then when you've got this brain trust of like really intelligent people and you hire them carefully and whatnot, it is silly to then dictate the design from on high down to them. Like I'm not an ivory tower architect, and I never intended to be like that. And I've worked for organizations where that was kind of the way things were done. So I believe in building a kind of consensus, overusing the word consensus there, but a consensus amongst the engineering team from the bottom up, you know. So we kind of will kick about what are the problems we're trying to solve, how are we trying to do this, and then hopefully ideas emerge, and I'll maybe collate them a little bit, and then maybe put them together and maybe make a proposal that then flows back down into the organization and tries to get people aligned. And we did this recently with a feature we call smart assets, which is our take on how to do smart contracts, you know. And for a really long time, like a couple of years, I was asking engineers, how would you like to see a kind of smart contract system like on a blockchain that isn't like today? What kind of problems do you think that we could be solving? And just gradually I was recording all of these ideas in like a document here, there and everywhere. And eventually at some point got to a point where I was like, I think I can make a proposal. So made a kind of a bit of a proposal for at least what the problems were. And then we got like the whole of the engineering team in the company. We're talking like, I guess 25-ish people, something like that. And was this during the pandemic? I think it might have been. Maybe not. We did it remotely in either case. We've always been a company that enables people to work remotely as a sort of first class way of working. And we did a whole hackathon over a couple of days online with people in groups where they basically tried to figure out like, what could this smart assets thing be? What could it look like? They didn't write any code, they just designed, right? It was a design hackathon. It was a really beautiful thing. I mean, not only was it super fun for the engineering team because they got to be the dreamers, you know, saying, well, if I could invent anything, what would it be? But then at the end of it, we had like 4 or 5 different outputs that were like these very different, very radical takes on how you could do these things, right? That then sat with me and a bunch of others for a while because, you know, that's not a solution. But then over time, we started to think about how it could be solved, and the ideas started to emerge. Eventually, some of us came together, wrote a kind of proposal, shared it with the engineering team. They're then feeding back in real time. We're updating the design, and we get to a place where we're kind of broadly aligned as an engineering team, and we've got something exciting. We think it can be patented. We think it's a big deal, right? And it's a beautiful thing to see that happen. And then, like, we literally just, I think it was 2 weeks ago, had our first company get together since before the pandemic, and loads of people in this company at this point have like never met each other because they were hired like through the pandemic. And we came together in London, and we basically then took this design and turned it into a roadmap and all of the things we were going to develop. And it's just like, it's a lot of really cool, smart people in a room together, interrogating the design, making proposals, arguing each other in a respectful, grown-up, wonderful way. Like it's so beautiful when you can just watch a team performing like that and being just so great. It makes you feel awesome about like your hiring decisions, which not all of mine have been stellar in my career.
Yeah, I don't think anyone can say that theirs has been. Yeah, there's always one or two slip-ups, no matter how hard or careful you try to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just seeing that kind of come about is a real validation of the journey that we're on. And it's a journey, right? I think, so I've talked about how our platform enables like rich forms of identity within it. And I think that's important. I don't think being purely anonymous is the best model. But we've also talked about how our asset modeling model is rich and powerful. But I believe there's like a third pillar of our technology that we haven't even really gotten to designing yet, which is really, I guess it's our answer to DAOs. It's how do you do decision making, governance, sense making, voting, all of that kind of stuff on a blockchain. When I say voting, I don't mean democratic voting. I don't want to go creating a technology that will fundamentally undermine democracy, but I mean like if you've got a use case in which, I don't know, it's the Timber ecosystem, how do other people in the Timber ecosystem decide if they want to now allow a new regulator to come into that system, that kind of thing, right? How can they do that? What's the way that they can express that and capture that on the blockchain? We haven't even really dreamed about this yet, and I can't wait to, quite frankly, because dreaming up solutions to these kinds of issues that are both good solutions, but also enable like really strong ethical outcomes, like ethical technologies that do good in society. That's what we're about. That's what we like.
Well, if that's what you're going to be about, there's tons of ethical solutions needed for many companies, probably every company.
Yes.
So you'll be very busy. Listen,
Yes,
I can't thank you enough for coming on to Crypto and Blockchain Talk. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it. I find podcasts really nerve-wracking, but you've made it just a very pleasant process.
Oh, thanks. I'll make sure next time you come on as well that just as lovely and welcoming as always. God, that sounds so bad. Yeah, I'm just glad you had a good time. Yeah, we're not that saccharine sweet here, believe me. I would like to thank everyone for tuning into this week's Crypto and Blockchain Talk. Please remember to tell your friends and family to listen to this beautiful podcast on one of over 70 different podcasting platforms. Please look at cryptoandblockchaintalk.com for a partial list. The rest you could just find if you Google. In addition, these beautiful podcasts are broadcast on our sister radio station, crypto24radio.com. Crypto24radio.com plays these wonderful podcast, like I said, plus news, music, and more 24/7 around the world. Of course, we love to hear from you more than anything, and we have our social media accounts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, but most importantly, and the way we love to speak to you most of all, is through email. So please email us at education@savvydigital.com. Again, when you come to us and you listen to our podcast, we know your time is valuable, and the fact that you give us your valuable time means the world. So please be safe, take care, and goodbye for now.